stronger than all that scared me far less than this one. Put us up this. If you return. But mark my word. It's not possible.
Avengers Doomsday is shaping up to be much more than another superhero sequel. It is positioned as one of Marvel Studios' biggest attempts to bring together different generations, different teams, and even different corners of Marvel's cinematic history in a single event. The movie is officially scheduled to arrive in theaters on December 18, 2026, and that date is important because earlier announcements had placed the film much sooner. Marvel's current official schedule confirms the December release, so anyone still seeing the older May 2026 date should understand that it is outdated. What makes Doomsday especially fascinating is not simply that another Avengers movie is coming. It is the extraordinary combination of characters Marvel has confirmed, the return of directors Anthony and Joe Russo, and above all the decision to bring Robert Downey Jr. back into the Marvel Universe not as Tony Stark, but as Victor Von Doom, better known as Dr. Doom. That single casting decision completely changes the emotional atmosphere surrounding this movie. For more than a decade, Downey was the face of Tony Stark and Iron Man. His performance helped establish the tone of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and Tony's journey eventually became one of the emotional foundations of Avengers: Endgame. Bringing the same actor back as one of Marvel's most important villains creates an immediate psychological tension for the audience before the story even begins. Marvel has officially identified Downey's new role as Victor Von Doom, meaning the safest way to approach the movie right now is not to assume that Dr. Doom is secretly Tony Stark or that he is automatically an Iron Man variant. Those theories may be entertaining, but until the movie or Marvel confirms something more specific, they remain theories. The confirmed fact is already dramatic enough: Robert Downey Jr. is Dr. Doom. That choice gives the Russos an unusual storytelling weapon. Every time audiences look at Doom, they will inevitably remember Tony Stark. The filmmakers can use that history to create discomfort, nostalgia, uncertainty, and emotional conflict, particularly if characters who personally knew Tony encounter Doom. Imagine the difference between fighting an anonymous masked enemy and confronting a man whose face resembles someone who saved the universe. Whether the characters themselves recognize that resemblance, and whether the movie provides an in-universe explanation for it, remains unknown, but from an audience perspective the association cannot be avoided. That is precisely why this casting has generated so much attention. Doomsday also marks Anthony and Joe Russo's return to directing an Avengers film after their enormously influential run on Captain America, The Winter Soldier, Captain America, Civil War, Avengers, Infinity War, and Avengers, Endgame. Their involvement matters because the Russos have already demonstrated that they can manage enormous ensembles while maintaining momentum. Infinity War contained a huge number of characters spread across different locations, yet its central conflict remained understandable because Thanos provided the narrative spine. Endgame had the even harder job of resolving numerous character arcs and years of interconnected storytelling. Doomsday faces a comparable challenge, but in some ways its structure could be even more complicated. Marvel has officially announced characters associated with the Avengers, Wakanda, the Fantastic Four, the X-Men, and the newer hero lineup. That means the movie cannot survive purely on cameos. If every returning character simply appears for applause and then disappears, the result could become a collection of introductions rather than a coherent story. The Russos' biggest responsibility will therefore be hierarchy, deciding which characters carry the emotional story, which characters drive the central conflict, and which characters serve supporting functions. The confirmed cast illustrates the scale of that problem. Marvel's announced lineup includes Chris Hemsworth, Vanessa Kirby, Anthony Mackie, Sebastian Stan, Letitia Wright, Paul Rudd, Wyatt Russell, Tenoch Huerta Mejia, Eben Moss Bachrach, Simu Liu, Florence Pugh, Kelsey Grammer, Louis Pullman, Danny Ramirez, Joseph Quinn, David Harbour, Winston Duke, Hannah John Kamen, Tom Hiddleston, Patrick Stewart, Ian McKellen, Alan Cumming, Rebecca Romaine, James Marsden, Channing Tatum, Pedro Pascal, and Robert Downey Jr. Marvel has subsequently confirmed additional appearances, including Chris Evans returning as Steve Rogers and Catherine Newton returning as Cassie Lang. That is already a remarkable concentration of established characters. Chris Hemsworth means Thor remains connected to the Avengers saga. Anthony Mackie brings Sam Wilson, now operating as Captain America. Sebastian Stan brings Bucky Barnes, a character whose history reaches back to the earliest Captain America films. Letitia Wright returns as Shuri, while Winston Duke returns as M'Baku and Tenoch Huerta Mejia as Namor, giving the story access to the political and technological worlds surrounding Wakanda and Talokan. Simu Liu brings Shang-Chi, whose future importance has been anticipated since his introduction. Florence Pugh, Wyatt Russell, Louis Pullman, David Harbour, Hannah John Kamen, and Sebastian Stan connect Doomsday with the team of characters established in the new Avengers. Then there is the Fantastic Four. Pedro Pascal's Reed Richards, Vanessa Kirby's Sue Storm, Joseph Quinn's Johnny Storm, and Eben Moss Bachrach's Ben Grimm represent Marvel's first family, and their inclusion could be particularly significant because Doctor Doom is historically inseparable from Fantastic Four mythology. In Marvel Comics, Victor Von Doom is not merely a generic Avengers villain. His rivalry with Reed Richards is one of Marvel's defining intellectual and personal conflicts. Reed and Doom are both brilliant men, but their philosophies, egos, methods, and relationships with power take them in radically different directions. That makes Pedro Pascal's Reed Richards potentially one of the most important characters in Doomsday even if the Avengers name appears in the title. If the film wants Doom to feel like Victor Von Doom rather than simply a powerful final boss, his relationship with Reed could provide essential dramatic depth. Doom works best when his threat is intellectual, political, technological, mystical, and personal all at once. He should not need to prove his danger simply by throwing stronger punches than the heroes. His greatest weapon is often his conviction that he understands the world better than everyone else and that only his control can save it. A compelling Doom does not think of himself as a meaningless destroyer. He can believe that domination is justified because he considers himself uniquely capable of imposing order. That philosophy could fit perfectly into a multiversal crisis. If reality itself is unstable, a character like Doom could argue that freedom, competing heroes, and uncontrolled universes are the problem, while absolute authority is the solution. This is analysis rather than a confirmed plot description, because Marvel has deliberately kept the full story secret, but it illustrates why Doom is such an effective choice for the next Avengers-level threat. He can challenge the heroes not only physically but philosophically. The X-Men presence expands the possibilities even further. Marvel's official promotional material has confirmed Patrick Stewart as Professor Charles Xavier, Ian McKellen as Magneto, and James Marsden as Cyclops, while the announced cast also includes Alan Cumming and Rebecca Romijn, bringing back performers associated with Nightcrawler and Mystique. Kelsey Grammer is also part of the announced lineup after returning as Beast. These are not minor names for longtime Marvel viewers. Stewart and McKellen helped define the cinematic versions of Professor X and Magneto beginning with the early X-Men era, while Marsden's Cyclops, Grammer's Beast, Cummings' Nightcrawler, and Romijn's Mystique connect Doomsday to a superhero film lineage that predates the MCU itself. Their inclusion makes Doomsday feel less like a conventional Fifth Avengers adventure and more like a convergence of Marvel movie history. The emotional significance of these actors should not be underestimated. Younger viewers may primarily know Marvel through the MCU, but audiences who followed superhero movies in the early 2000s experienced the X-Men films as one of the genre's foundational franchises. Seeing these characters interact with the MCU's heroes could therefore create a generational crossover. The important question is how Marvel uses them. Nostalgia can produce an enormous opening weekend reaction, but nostalgia alone cannot sustain a film. A returning character needs a dramatic purpose. Professor X could contribute knowledge, leadership, or moral perspective. Magneto could bring unpredictability because his goals frequently overlap with heroic interests without fully aligning with heroic methods. Cyclops can provide battlefield leadership. Beast offers scientific intelligence. Nightcrawler provides a visually distinctive power set. Mystique introduces uncertainty and espionage potential. If these characters are integrated around specific narrative functions, the X-Men presence can deepen the movie rather than simply decorate it. Chris Evans' confirmed return as Steve Rogers adds another major emotional question. Steve's story appeared to reach a peaceful conclusion in Avengers Endgame, when he returned the Infinity Stones and ultimately chose to live the life he had missed. Marvel has confirmed that Steve Rogers returns in Doomsday, but the exact circumstances surrounding that return remain intentionally undisclosed. It would therefore be irresponsible to claim that the film definitely reverses Endgame, introduces a Steve variant, uses time travel, or reveals another explanation. Any of those ideas may be discussed as speculation, but none should be presented as established story information without confirmation. What is clear is that Steve Rogers has enormous symbolic importance. Anthony Mackie's Sam Wilson carries the Captain America identity now, so putting Steve and Sam into the same event has the potential to explore legacy in a way that goes beyond nostalgia. Sam does not need Steve's return to validate him. In fact, one of the more interesting possibilities would be allowing audiences to see how far Sam has grown into leadership while Steve exists in the same narrative environment. The Avengers have repeatedly been defined by leadership tensions, from Tony and Steve's ideological conflict to the fractured alliances of Civil War. Doomsday arrives in an era where there is no single obvious original Avengers command structure. Sam Wilson, Thor, Reed Richards, Shuri, Bucky Barnes, Yelena Belova, and other powerful personalities could all have different ideas about what must be done. That creates opportunities for conflict before Doctor Doom even enters the battlefield. Thor's return is equally significant. Marvel's teaser campaign has specifically spotlighted Chris Hemsworth's Thor, confirming that the character remains an important part of the event. Thor is one of the few surviving central heroes from the original Avengers lineup and carries memories that newer heroes simply do not possess. He fought Loki, Ultron, Gila, Thanos, and countless cosmic threats. He also watched many of his closest allies die. That history gives Thor a different relationship with catastrophe. When younger heroes encounter something that appears impossible, Thor has already lived through several impossible situations. At the same time, his immense power creates a storytelling challenge. If Doctor Doom is going to stand against a coalition containing Thor, the Fantastic Four, X-Men, Wakandan technology, Shang-Chi, and multiple enhanced heroes, Doom needs to be formidable on several levels. Pure strength will not be enough. Strategy becomes crucial. A villain capable of manipulating heroes into fighting on unfavorable terms is much more dangerous than a villain who simply waits for everyone to attack him simultaneously. Loki's presence, through Tom Hiddleston, introduces another fascinating dimension. Loki's recent MCU journey has transformed him dramatically from the antagonist of the first Avengers movie. Without assuming exactly how Doomsday will use him, his inclusion creates a bridge between the Avengers' earliest history and Marvel's newer multiversal storytelling. Loki understands realities, timelines, sacrifice, identity, and cosmic consequences in ways that many Earth-based heroes do not. If Doomsday deals heavily with threats across realities, Loki is naturally relevant. Yet Marvel has not publicly explained the exact mechanics of his role, so any claim that he definitely performs a particular action in the movie would be speculation. This distinction between confirmation and theory is especially important with Doomsday because online discussion around the film is filled with alleged leaks, supposed plot descriptions, anonymous claims, edited images, and fan theories. A reliable analysis has to separate what Marvel has actually announced from what fans hope or expect to see. The same principle applies to the movie's budget. As of the information publicly available from Marvel's official channels, a final official production budget figure has not been announced. Large numbers circulating online should therefore not automatically be treated as confirmed facts. We can reasonably say that Doomsday is a massive studio production involving a huge ensemble and extensive effects work, but assigning an exact dollar figure without reliable confirmation would turn speculation into misinformation. For a movie this large, financial analysis will become more meaningful once trustworthy trade reporting or official production information establishes the cost. Until then, the accurate statement is simple: the publicly confirmed budget is not currently available. The release strategy, however, is clear. Avengers Doomsday is scheduled for theatrical release on December 18, 2026. Marvel's own current movie schedule lists that date, and the film is being promoted as a theatrical event. Its position in December gives it a major holiday corridor and distinguishes it from the spring and summer slots historically associated with several earlier Avengers entries. The date also places the film approximately 1 year before Avengers: Secret Wars, which Marvel currently schedules for December 17, 2027. That relationship is enormously important when analyzing Doomsday. Doomsday does not exist as an isolated endpoint. Marvel has already announced another Avengers film immediately following it, with Anthony and Joe Russo directing Secret Wars as well. Therefore, Doomsday may need to accomplish two seemingly contradictory goals: deliver a satisfying large-scale movie of its own while also leaving major narrative momentum for Secret Wars. Infinity War faced a similar structural problem. It told a complete dramatic story centered on Thanos' mission, but its ending radically changed the universe and demanded a continuation. Doomsday could use a comparable philosophy without copying Infinity War. The film needs its own central dramatic question, its own emotional arc, and its own meaningful resolution, even if the consequences lead directly into Secret Wars. If Doomsday functions only as 3 hours of setup, audiences could leave unsatisfied. If it resolves everything too neatly, Secret Wars could feel disconnected. Finding the balance will be one of the film's most difficult creative tasks. The title itself suggests catastrophe. Doomsday naturally implies an approaching point of destruction, but it also cleverly incorporates Doom's name. That makes the title simultaneously a description of a crisis and a branding statement for its villain. Doctor Doom is not Thanos 2.0, and Marvel should resist treating him that way. Thanos' cinematic identity was built around a specific cosmic ideology and the Infinity Stones. Doom requires a different texture. Victor Von Doom traditionally combines scientific genius, technological sophistication, political authority, enormous ego, and mystical knowledge. He is compelling because he can enter almost any type of Marvel story. He can confront Reed Richards intellectually, challenge governments politically, battle sorcerers mystically, and face superheroes physically. He can be ruler, scientist, warrior, strategist, or tyrant depending on the situation. That versatility makes him ideal for a crossover containing so many different factions. Reed Richards may understand one side of Doom. Doctor Strange, if involved, could understand another, though his participation should not be assumed without confirmation. Wakanda might evaluate Doom as a geopolitical and technological threat. Thor could see a powerful ruler attempting to impose his will on worlds. The X-Men could interpret his actions through their own history of persecution, power, and survival. The Avengers could simply recognize that whatever Doom is planning threatens lives on a massive scale. Different groups can therefore oppose the same villain for different reasons, which is dramatically richer than assembling everyone because a portal opens over a city. The Fantastic Four may ultimately become the emotional key. Marvel Studios president Kevin Feige has publicly discussed the excitement of bringing the Fantastic Four together with the Avengers and X-Men. That combination represents something the MCU has never previously been able to execute at this scale. For decades, film rights separated major Marvel families across different studios and continuities. Doomsday arrives in an era where Marvel can place these characters in the same event. That gives the film historical significance beyond its individual plot. Audiences could see Reed Richards and other brilliant Marvel minds sharing scenes, mutants standing alongside Avengers, Wakandan leaders interacting with heroes from alternate worlds, and veteran characters meeting a new generation. Yet bigger is not automatically better. The larger the cast becomes, the more disciplined the screenplay must be. Every major scene has to accomplish multiple objectives. A conversation between Reed and Sam Wilson, for example, could simultaneously establish their personalities, reveal strategic disagreement, explain part of the threat, and build mutual respect. A confrontation between Magneto and Doom could communicate political philosophy while escalating danger. A Thor sequence could provide spectacle while revealing the scale of Doom's power. Efficient storytelling becomes essential when dozens of recognizable characters compete for screen time. This is where the Russo brothers' experience could become the movie's greatest advantage. Civil War was technically a Captain America film, but it incorporated many Avengers while introducing Black Panther and Spider-Man into the MCU. Infinity War constantly moved among separate teams without losing its central objective. Doomsday may demand an even more sophisticated version of that ensemble architecture. Rather than giving everyone equal screen time, the movie will likely need several tiers of characters: central protagonists, major supporting players, specialist characters who serve particular plot functions, and appearances designed to connect larger continuity. Equal screen time is not the same thing as good ensemble storytelling. Some characters may need 40 minutes, others may need 10. What matters is whether each appearance contributes something meaningful. Anthony Mackie's Sam Wilson is particularly worth watching because an Avengers film requires someone to represent the idea of the Avengers themselves. Sam inherited Steve Rogers' shield, but leadership of a global or multiversal coalition is a different challenge. He does not possess Thor's godlike strength, Reed's scientific intellect, or Shuri's technological resources. His strength is human leadership, empathy, tactical experience, and the ability to persuade people with different motivations to work together. Those qualities could become invaluable when the film contains teams that have never met. The Avengers, Fantastic Four, X-Men, Wakandans, and New Avengers are not automatically one organization just because audiences recognize all of them as heroes. Someone must create cooperation. Sam could be one of the characters capable of doing that. Reed Richards presents the opposite type of leadership: analytical, scientific, and potentially consumed by solving impossible problems. Professor X offers another style based on mentorship and diplomacy. Magneto represents leadership through strength and ideological certainty. Doom, meanwhile, represents the extreme version of authoritarian leadership, the belief that only one superior individual should decide the future. If the screenplay intentionally contrasts these models, Doomsday could become much more intellectually interesting than a conventional crossover. The return of older X-Men performers also allows the movie to explore time itself as an emotional force. These actors carry decades of audience memory. Patrick Stewart's Professor X first appeared in the original X-Men era, while Ian McKellen's Magneto became one of the most recognizable comic book villains on film. Their return does not need to pretend that no time has passed. Age can give these characters gravity. A veteran Xavier or Magneto confronting the possible destruction of worlds carries a different emotional weight from younger versions beginning their journeys. James Marsden's Cyclops also deserves meaningful treatment. Earlier X-Men films often gave Wolverine greater narrative prominence, while Cyclops received less space than many comic readers expected. Doomsday could offer an opportunity to present Scott Summers as the experienced field leader he is capable of being. Again, that is a creative possibility rather than a confirmed plot claim, but the casting makes it a relevant point of analysis. Channing Tatum's presence is another connection to Marvel's expanding crossover history. His Gambit appearance brought a character to the screen after years of unrealized plans surrounding the role, and his inclusion in Doomsday demonstrates how Marvel is willing to draw from characters outside the traditional Avengers structure. The danger is that audiences may begin treating every casting announcement as evidence for endless surprise cameos. That mindset can damage the viewing experience. A movie should be judged by what it tells, not by how many rumored characters fail to appear. Doomsday already has an enormous confirmed roster. It does not require every Marvel actor in history to justify its scale. The best approach for viewers is to focus on officially announced characters and allow genuine surprises to remain surprises. Visually, the movie has enormous potential because its factions have distinct design languages. Wakanda combines advanced technology with cultural identity. The Fantastic Four bring a retro-futuristic aesthetic established in their own world. The X-Men have their recognizable mutant iconography. Thor introduces cosmic and mythological imagery. Doom himself traditionally blends medieval monarchic imagery with futuristic armor and technology. Bringing these visual worlds together can create an unusually diverse blockbuster if the filmmakers preserve their identities instead of flattening everything into the same gray battlefield. Production design becomes a storytelling tool. A Doom-controlled environment should tell us something about Doom before he speaks. Fantastic Four technology should feel different from Wakandan technology because the societies and personalities behind them are different. The X-Men should not simply look like another Avengers subdivision. Distinction makes crossover meaningful. The same applies to action. When a movie contains dozens of superpowered characters, generic combat quickly becomes exhausting. The strongest superhero action sequences are built around personality and specific abilities. Nightcrawler's teleportation should create a completely different rhythm from Thor's lightning. Reed Richards' elasticity should produce inventive problem-solving rather than ordinary punching. Sue Storm's force fields can be defensive, offensive, and tactical. Johnny Storm can change the geography of a battle through flight and flame. Ben Grimm brings raw physical strength. Shang-Chi's fighting style and the power associated with the Ten Rings can create another distinct visual vocabulary. Magneto's control over metal changes any environment containing technology. Cyclops' optic blasts make positioning important. M'Baku fights differently from enhanced superhumans. Shuri combines agility with Wakandan technology. Ant-Man introduces scale manipulation. If the Russos build sequences around combinations of these powers, Doomsday can create action audiences have never seen before. Imagine not merely heroes attacking Doom one after another, but characters combining abilities in strategic ways. That is where ensemble action becomes memorable. Infinity War succeeded in moments where powers interacted. Doctor Strange and Spider-Man working around Thanos, Iron Man using rapidly changing technology, Thor arriving in Wakanda, are characters coordinating on Titan. Doomsday has an even larger toolbox. The emotional challenge is equally large. Avengers Endgame worked because spectacle rested on relationships audiences had followed for years. Tony and Steve reconciled. Natasha and Clint fought over sacrifice. Thor confronted his grief. Tony met his father. Steve finally chose a personal life. Those scenes made the final battle matter. Doomsday cannot rely entirely on inherited emotion from Endgame. It must build new relationships worth caring about. Sam Wilson and Reed Richards have not shared years of MCU history. The Fantastic Four and X-Men are newly integrated into this larger cinematic structure. The new Avengers have their own dynamics. Therefore, the movie needs quieter scenes between enormous action sequences. Without them, the audience may admire the crossover without feeling it. One of the most promising elements is that the characters naturally have reasons to disagree. Reed Richards may prioritize scientific solutions. Shuri may challenge his assumptions. Magneto may distrust human-led institutions. Sam Wilson may insist on protecting civilians before pursuing larger strategic objectives. Thor may understand cosmic danger but have little patience for political debate. Bucky may be suspicious of anyone attempting centralized control. Yelena may approach heroism with a more cynical practicality. Loki may know information others cannot easily comprehend. Doom could exploit every disagreement. A brilliant villain does not merely overpower heroes, he understands their weaknesses. If Victor recognizes that this coalition is fragile, he can turn cooperation into the battlefield. Robert Downey Jr.'s performance will be central to making that work. The challenge for Downey is enormous because audiences know his rhythms as Tony Stark so well. If Doom sounds, moves, jokes, and reacts like Tony, the casting could feel distracting. The performance needs its own identity. Victor should have a different physical presence, vocal rhythm, worldview, and emotional temperature. Doom is often associated with theatrical confidence and almost regal self-importance. The mask can also become crucial because it forces performance through voice and movement rather than facial expression. Downey has an opportunity to make audiences forget Tony during individual scenes even though the larger meta-connection remains. That would be the strongest possible outcome. The casting creates emotional tension, but the performance creates a genuinely separate character. Another question is how much of Doom's background Doomsday will explain. A villain this important deserves more than a few minutes of exposition. Victor Von Doom traditionally has a rich history involving Latveria, Reed Richards, personal tragedy, ambition, science, magic, and political power. The MCU does not need to reproduce every comic detail exactly, but it needs enough foundation for viewers to understand why this man believes what he believes. Thanos became effective in Infinity War because the movie spent significant time with him. Audiences understood his objective, his twisted reasoning, his relationship with Gamora, and his willingness to sacrifice everything for his mission. Doom deserves comparable attention without becoming an imitation. Perhaps the movie follows him for substantial portions. Perhaps his history is revealed through Reed. Perhaps different factions know different pieces of his identity. The exact method is unknown, but neglecting his characterization would waste one of Marvel's greatest villains. The presence of Avengers Secret Wars on the official schedule also changes how we interpret Doom's potential trajectory. Marvel confirms Secret Wars for December 17, 2027, again with the Russo brothers directing and Robert Downey Jr. listed. That establishes that the larger story extends beyond Doomsday. It does not tell us exactly what happens at the end of Doomsday, and viewers should be careful not to convert comic book knowledge into movie spoilers. Marvel films frequently adapt concepts rather than reproducing stories panel for panel. The title Secret Wars carries enormous comic history, but the cinematic version can combine, alter, or reinvent that material. What Doomsday must do is make whatever comes next feel earned. If realities collide, if alliances collapse, if Doom gains greater power, or if the universe changes dramatically, those possibilities need narrative groundwork rather than appearing only as a final tease. The movie's December 2026 release also means Marvel still has time to reveal more information through trailers and official marketing. As those materials arrive, some current questions will become clearer, while others will likely remain secret until opening night. Right now, the confirmed information already supports one conclusion: Marvel is treating Avengers Doomsday as a major convergence event. The Avengers name is returning after a long theatrical gap. The Russo brothers are returning. Robert Downey Jr. is returning in a radically different role. Steve Rogers is returning. Thor is returning. Veteran X-Men are returning. The Fantastic Four are entering an Avengers event. Wakandan characters, new Avengers characters, Shang-Chi, Ant-Man, Loki, Namor, and others are part of the announced ensemble. This is not a small transitional chapter. It is designed to bring multiple strands together before Secret Wars. But scale alone will not determine whether the film succeeds. The real test is whether audiences can emotionally understand why these characters are together and what they stand to lose. Doctor Doom needs to be more than a marketing reveal. Reed Richards needs more than scientific exposition. Sam Wilson needs space to lead. Thor needs purpose beyond nostalgia. Steve Rogers' return needs to respect the emotional significance of his previous ending. The X-Men need narrative value beyond applause. The Fantastic Four need to feel essential rather than newly added guests. The new Avengers need to matter. And the story must make this extraordinary collection of heroes feel like one movie rather than several franchises competing for attention. If the Russos solve that problem, Doomsday could become one of the MCU's most ambitious ensemble films. If they do not, the enormous cast could become the very thing that overwhelms it. That tension is what makes the project so interesting to analyze before release. We know enough to understand its scale, but not enough to know exactly how Marvel will connect the pieces. The strongest reason to anticipate Avengers Doomsday is therefore not simply the question of who will appear. It is the question of what Marvel intends to do with everyone it has assembled. Doctor Doom standing opposite Avengers, Fantastic Four, X-Men, Wakandan heroes, veteran icons, and newer characters creates possibilities that Marvel cinema could not have realistically delivered during its earliest phases. December 18, 2026 will reveal whether those possibilities become a coherent story. Until then, the verified picture is already substantial. Avengers Doomsday is a theatrical Marvel Studios event directed by Anthony and Joe Russo. Robert Downey Jr. is playing Victor Von Doom. A massive cross-generational cast has been officially announced. Steve Rogers and Thor are confirmed to return. X-Men veterans and the Fantastic Four are involved, and Avengers Secret Wars is scheduled to follow on December 17, 2027. The production budget, however, has not been officially confirmed in Marvel's currently available public information, so attaching an exact figure to the film would be premature. For audiences, that distinction matters because Doomsday has already accumulated enough genuine information to be exciting without relying on fabricated leaks. The movie's greatest promise lies in collision: old Avengers history colliding with new leadership, the Fantastic Four colliding with the wider MCU, X-Men history colliding with Avengers history, science colliding with power, heroes colliding with one another, and ultimately all of them colliding with Victor Von Doom. If Marvel turns those collisions into character-driven drama rather than cameo-driven spectacle, Avengers Doomsday could become the event its title and extraordinary cast suggest it is meant to be. The most interesting way to understand Avengers Doomsday at this stage is not simply to ask how many superheroes Marvel can fit into one movie, but to ask why these particular heroes are being brought together and what kind of conflict could realistically require such an extraordinary alliance. Marvel Studios has already established that the movie will bring together characters from dramatically different corners of its cinematic world, and that immediately creates a storytelling challenge unlike the one faced by the original Avengers. When Nick Fury assembled Tony Stark, Steve Rogers, Thor, Bruce Banner, Natasha Romanoff and Clint Barton, those characters were very different, but they still belong to a relatively contained cinematic universe. Doomsday is operating on a much larger conceptual canvas. The Avengers' legacy now exists alongside the Fantastic Four, veteran X-Men characters, Wakandan leadership, Namor, Shang-Chi, members of the New Avengers, Loki, Ant-Man and other heroes with completely different histories and priorities. The central dramatic question therefore becomes bigger than, can the heroes defeat Dr. Doom? Before that question can even matter, the movie has to answer another one: can these people function together at all? That is where Avengers Doomsday has the opportunity to become more than a giant crossover. A team-up becomes interesting when cooperation is difficult. If everyone immediately agrees about the threat, immediately trusts one another and immediately follows the same plan, then the size of the ensemble becomes visually impressive but dramatically shallow. The stronger possibility is that Dr. Doom enters a world already divided by different philosophies of heroism. Sam Wilson represents responsibility without supernatural superiority. Thor comes from a world of gods and cosmic warfare. Reed Richards approaches impossible situations through science and intellect. Shuri combines political responsibility with technological brilliance. Magneto has historically viewed survival through the lens of power and distrust. Charles Xavier traditionally believes cooperation can overcome fear. Bucky Barnes understands manipulation, warfare and the consequences of losing personal freedom. Yelena Belova approaches danger with the instincts of someone shaped by covert operations rather than idealistic superhero mythology. Loki understands deception and cosmic consequences better than almost anyone. Put these personalities in one room and there should be disagreement before there is unity. That disagreement could be exactly what makes Victor Von Doom dangerous. Doom is most compelling when he understands people well enough to exploit their weaknesses. His intelligence should not be demonstrated merely by having another character announce that he is a genius. The screenplay needs to show his intelligence through preparation. If Doom knows that Reed Richards will always attempt to solve the impossible equation, he can give Reed a problem designed to consume his attention. If he knows that Sam Wilson will prioritize innocent lives, he can create a crisis that forces Sam away from the larger objective. If he understands Thor's pride and emotional history, he can manipulate him into confronting a threat directly. If he understands Magneto's suspicion of human institutions, he can present information that makes cooperation appear dangerous. If he understands Loki, he may know that Loki will look for the hidden mechanism behind the obvious plan. A villain capable of anticipating the heroes can make an enormous cast feel necessary because defeating him requires different forms of intelligence, courage and sacrifice. That is one reason Robert Downey Jr.'s casting as Victor Von Doom carries such enormous pressure. Audiences already associate Downey with one of the smartest characters in the MCU. Tony Stark frequently survived because he could improvise faster than his enemies. Doom cannot simply feel like Tony Stark with darker clothing. His intelligence should operate differently. Tony was improvisational, restless and often emotionally impulsive. Doom can be terrifying precisely because he may be patient. Tony often invented a solution while the crisis was already happening. Doom should feel like someone who created the conditions of the crisis long before everyone else understood there was a problem. If the movie establishes that distinction, audiences will gradually stop looking at Downey and seeing Iron Man. They will begin seeing Victor. That transformation is essential. The casting is designed to create an immediate reaction, but the performance has to survive after the surprise disappears. Everyone already knows Robert Downey Jr. is in the movie. The reveal itself cannot carry the character anymore. What matters now is characterization. The voice, posture, costume, mask, dialogue, philosophy and relationships surrounding Doom must build a new identity. There is also enormous potential in the relationship between Doom and Reed Richards. Pedro Pascal's Reed does not need to become the only protagonist for this relationship to matter. Reed and Doom represent two versions of intellectual power. Reed's greatest strength is his ability to understand problems that appear incomprehensible. That strength can also become a weakness if he begins believing every problem has an intellectual solution. Doom can attack that assumption. A compelling conflict would force Reed to confront something intelligence alone cannot solve. Perhaps trust becomes more important than calculation. Perhaps sacrifice becomes necessary. Perhaps Reed must accept that another character understands something he does not. None of those possibilities should be treated as confirmed plot information, but they demonstrate the dramatic territory available to the filmmakers. Dr. Doom is uniquely suited to challenge Reed because the rivalry can be intensely personal while simultaneously affecting entire worlds. Doom does not merely want to prove that he is powerful. Traditionally, one of his defining characteristics is the need to prove that he is right. That difference matters. A villain who wants destruction can be stopped by preventing destruction. A villain who wants ideological victory keeps fighting even after the physical battle changes. The heroes might defeat one machine, army or plan without defeating Doom's argument. That could make Avengers Doomsday unusually relevant to the larger MCU because Marvel's heroes currently exist without the unified structure they once had. The original Avengers were not always harmonious, but they developed history together. The newer generation is fragmented. Sam Wilson may carry Captain America's shield, but that does not automatically make every superhero on Earth part of his team. The Fantastic Four have their own family structure. The X-Men arrive with their own relationships and experiences. Wakanda has national interests. Namor has the interests of his own people. Thor has responsibilities beyond Earth. Loki exists on an entirely different cosmic level. The new Avengers emerged through a very different path from the original team. Doom could look at that fragmentation and see weakness. He might even believe that centralized control is the only answer to chaos. This is where the movie could establish a philosophical conflict between authoritarian certainty and cooperative heroism. Doom can promise order. The Avengers must prove that cooperation between imperfect people is stronger than control by one supposedly perfect ruler. That theme would give meaning to the giant cast. The heroes would not simply assemble because the franchise title says Avengers. Their ability to assemble would become the argument of the movie. Steve Rogers' confirmed return becomes especially important when viewed through that lens. Steve represents an earlier era when the Avengers had recognizable moral leadership. His presence can remind both characters and audiences what the team once represented. But Doomsday should not use Steve to erase Sam Wilson's development. The more interesting dramatic choice would be to distinguish their leadership styles. Steve was shaped by World War II, military service and a very specific understanding of duty. Sam comes from a different generation and has experienced a different world. He has worked with veterans, fought alongside Avengers, opposed institutions when necessary and taken responsibility for the Captain America identity in a complicated political environment. If Steve and Sam share meaningful scenes, the movie has an opportunity to show that legacy is not duplication. Sam does not become Captain America by behaving exactly like Steve. He becomes Captain America by carrying the values forward while responding to the world in his own way. A large-scale crisis involving Dr. Doom could make that distinction especially powerful. Steve might instinctively understand certain forms of warfare, while Sam understands the modern political and human consequences of a global crisis. Their approaches could complement one another rather than compete. The return of Chris Hemsworth's Thor provides another bridge between generations. Thor has lived through nearly every stage of the Avengers' cinematic history. He remembers the first assembly in New York. He remembers Ultron. He remembers the Avengers splitting apart. He remembers Thanos. He remembers the snap in the final battle against Thanos' army. That history makes Thor potentially one of the emotional witnesses of Doomsday. When he looks around at the people fighting beside him, many of them are not the teammates he originally knew. Tony is gone. Natasha is gone. Steve's circumstances have changed dramatically. The Avengers' identity itself has evolved. Thor can therefore represent continuity while the movie introduces a new coalition. More importantly, Thor has experienced devastating failure. Infinity War transformed him from a nearly unstoppable god into someone forced to confront the fact that strength and determination were not enough. He believed killing Thanos would solve everything, and he discovered too late that one mistake could change the universe. That experience should logically affect how he approaches another potentially reality-threatening enemy. A mature Thor should not simply charge at Doom because Doom looks dangerous. He should understand that powerful enemies often have plans larger than the immediate battlefield. If the screenplay remembers that history, Thor becomes dramatically valuable rather than merely physically powerful. The X-Men introduce an entirely different kind of emotional history. Their inclusion does not only expand the number of characters. It changes the meaning of the crossover because the X-Men cinematic legacy developed separately from the MCU for many years. Patrick Stewart's Professor X and Ian McKellen's Magneto are especially important because their relationship has always embodied competing responses to fear and power. Xavier traditionally believes coexistence is possible. Magneto believes history repeatedly proves that vulnerable groups must possess enough power to defend themselves. Neither worldview can be reduced to a simple action movie slogan when written well. Bringing them into a crisis involving Doom could produce fascinating tension. Doom might present himself as someone capable of guaranteeing security. Magneto might understand the appeal of power while rejecting Doom's domination. Xavier might attempt diplomacy even when others consider diplomacy impossible. The Avengers might not immediately understand the history between these mutant leaders. The Fantastic Four might bring information from another perspective. Suddenly the crossover becomes a collision of ideologies instead of merely a collision of powers. James Marsden's Cyclops could be especially valuable in that environment because Scott Summers is fundamentally a field commander. An ensemble this large needs characters who can make tactical decisions under pressure. Sam Wilson can coordinate Avengers. Cyclops can coordinate X-Men. Reed Richards can analyze the larger problem. Thor can provide overwhelming power. Shuri can provide technological and strategic resources. If the movie allows different leaders to command different groups rather than forcing every hero into one giant formation, the action could remain understandable. That is one of the biggest lessons from Infinity War. The film divided its characters into smaller groups, each with a clear objective. Thor, Rocket and Groot pursued Stormbreaker. Tony, Peter, Strange and the Guardians confronted Thanos on Titan. Steve and the Earth-based heroes defended Wakanda. Thanos connected the stories because every group was responding to his mission. Doomsday could use a similar structural principle while creating entirely new combinations. Perhaps the Fantastic Four and Wakandans work together on one problem. Perhaps Thor and X-Men characters handle another. Perhaps Sam's Avengers protect civilians while Reed searches for a larger solution. The exact groupings remain unknown, but modular storytelling would prevent the ensemble from becoming incomprehensible. The Fantastic Four are particularly useful because each member serves a different narrative function. Reed is intellect. Sue Storm can become emotional and strategic stability. Johnny Storm brings youthful energy and enormous destructive potential. Ben Grimm brings physical strength, loyalty and humanity. Aben Moss Bachrach's Thing appearing alongside Wakandan characters in Marvel's teaser material already demonstrates how visually unusual these combinations can be. The Thing standing in a world associated with Wakanda immediately communicates that boundaries between Marvel franchises are collapsing. But again, visual novelty should be the beginning, not the end. Why are these characters together? What does Ben think of Wakanda? How does Shuri respond to Reed's technology? How does Namor respond to outsiders entering conflicts involving powerful nations? Those interactions can make the crossover feel alive. Namor is especially unpredictable because he does not operate according to conventional superhero morality. His priority is his people. He can cooperate with heroes when interests align, but that does not make him an Avenger in the traditional sense. Doom could potentially exploit those divided loyalties. If saving one world requires sacrificing another, characters such as Namor may make different calculations from Sam Wilson. That kind of moral conflict is exactly what an Avengers-scale event needs. The audience should sometimes understand why two heroic characters disagree. Civil War worked because the conflict was not simply good versus evil. Steve and Tony both had understandable motivations. Doomsday could recreate that level of tension without repeating the Sokovia Accords storyline. Instead of arguing about government oversight, heroes could disagree about how much they are willing to sacrifice to preserve reality. The multiverse, if it becomes central to the movie, naturally creates impossible ethical questions. What happens when saving one reality threatens another? Who gets to make that decision? Does Reed calculate survival mathematically? Does Sam reject sacrificing innocent people regardless of probability? Does Doom argue that only he has the courage to make the necessary choice? Does Magneto prioritize his people? Does Xavier insist there must be another solution? These are hypothetical analytical questions, not confirmed story events, but they demonstrate why the cast has the potential to support serious dramatic conflict. Loki's involvement becomes even more intriguing in this context. Tom Hiddleston has played Loki across an extraordinary range of moral identities: villain, reluctant ally, brother, trickster, survivor, and eventually a character carrying responsibilities far beyond his original ambitions. Loki began his MCU journey wanting a throne. His later development radically changed the meaning of that desire. Dr. Doom, by contrast, can embody the idea of someone who still believes absolute rule is justified. A scene between Loki and Doom could therefore carry enormous thematic weight. Loki knows what obsession with control can cost. Doom may believe Loki simply lacked the strength or conviction to succeed. Whether the movie explores anything like that is unknown, but the characters are philosophically compatible in fascinating ways. Loki also understands manipulation. He may recognize when Doom is presenting one plan while executing another. This could make Loki strategically important even if he is not involved in every action sequence. Ant-Man offers another valuable perspective. Paul Rudd Scott Lang is one of the MCU characters most closely associated with ordinary human vulnerability despite possessing extraordinary technology. Scott has a family. He has repeatedly experienced superhero events from a personal perspective. In Endgame, his return from the quantum realm helped trigger the Avengers' plan to reverse the snap. In Doomsday, his value may again extend beyond physical combat. His experience with unusual dimensions, scale, and quantum phenomena could become relevant depending on the nature of the crisis. But even if the plot does not lean heavily on quantum mechanics, Scott can provide a human reaction to increasingly impossible circumstances. Large superhero films need characters capable of reacting with disbelief. When everyone treats cosmic destruction as another day at work, the audience loses a sense of scale. Scott can remind viewers that what is happening is extraordinary. Shang-Chi occupies a different position. Simu Liu's hero entered the MCU with the 10 rings still surrounded by unanswered questions. The mysterious nature of those artifacts created obvious expectations that their larger significance would eventually matter. Doomsday could provide an opportunity to connect Shang-Chi more directly to the broader Avengers world. However, the precise function of the 10 rings in Doomsday has not been officially established, so it would be misleading to claim that they are definitely a key to defeating Doom or solving a multiversal problem. What can be said is that Shang-Chi brings a combination of martial skill, supernatural experience, and powerful ancient technology that distinguishes him from almost everyone else in the ensemble. If action sequences use that distinction properly, his scenes could be among the most visually creative in the film. Florence Pugh's Yelena Belova brings another style entirely. Yelena is not a cosmic hero. She is not a god, mutant monarch or scientific genius. She is a highly trained operative whose personality is grounded in personal relationships, trauma, humor and practical survival. In an enormous crossover, characters like Yelena can become surprisingly important because they prevent the story from floating entirely into abstract cosmic stakes. The multiverse will end is enormous, but enormous stakes can paradoxically feel emotionally distant. This specific person will lose someone they love, is smaller but often more powerful. The best Avengers movies connect the two. Endgame was about restoring half of all life, but audiences felt the stakes through individual relationships. Clint wanted his family back. Scott wanted Cassie. Tony wanted to protect Morgan while honoring Peter. Thor wanted redemption. Steve wanted to undo failure. Doomsday will need similar emotional anchors. Yelena's relationships with her teammates can provide one. Bucky Barnes can provide another. Bucky has one of the MCU's longest and most painful histories. He has been soldier, prisoner, assassin, fugitive and reluctant hero. His story revolves around control and identity, making him particularly relevant to any conflict involving a ruler who believes individuals should submit to a larger vision. Bucky knows what it means to have autonomy stolen. That could give him an instinctive rejection of Doom's philosophy even before he understands the cosmic details. Sebastian Stan also connects Doomsday directly to Steve Rogers' history, creating obvious emotional potential once Steve returns. Again, the circumstances of Steve's return remain deliberately mysterious, but Bucky's reaction could tell audiences a great deal. If the movie wants Steve's appearance to carry emotional weight, it should not treat his return as merely a crowd-pleasing entrance. Characters who loved him, fought beside him and built their lives after his departure need to react. Sam and Bucky are the most obvious examples. The same principle applies to Robert Downey Jr.'s Doom. If Doom's face is visible and if MCU characters perceive a resemblance to Tony Stark, the film must decide what that means emotionally. But Marvel has not confirmed how the characters interpret Downey's appearance in universe, so it would be wrong to state that they definitely believe Tony has returned. The filmmakers may choose an explanation audiences have not anticipated. What matters is that the casting creates a deliberate meta-level discomfort. The Russo brothers have themselves emphasized Downey's interest in unexpected creative choices. That suggests they understand the danger of simply repeating Tony Stark. The audience should eventually fear Doom for who Doom is, not merely react to him because he looks like someone they remember. The mask may help accomplish that. Dr. Doom's mask is not merely costume decoration. It is part of his identity. A properly realized Doom should be able to dominate a scene while fully masked. Voice becomes critical. Movement becomes critical. The way other characters react to him becomes critical. Darth Vader demonstrated decades ago that a masked villain can possess extraordinary cinematic presence when design, performance and sound work together. Doom has the potential for that kind of iconography. His armor should communicate that he exists at the intersection of medieval ruler and futuristic super scientist. His environment should reinforce that identity. If Latveria or another Doom-controlled territory plays a role, production design can tell audiences what kind of ruler he is. Are people terrified? Loyal? Both. Does his society appear efficient because freedom has been removed? Does technology make the environment beautiful while surveillance makes it oppressive? These details could communicate Doom's philosophy without exposition. One of the easiest mistakes would be reducing Doom to another villain who wants a glowing source of energy. Victor should feel like a civilization-level threat because he can organize people and systems, not merely destroy buildings. His political power is part of what separates him from villains like Ultron or Thanos. Thanos commanded armies, but he was fundamentally a conqueror pursuing a cosmic mission. Doom can actually govern. That means defeating him militarily may create another problem. What happens to the people under his rule? What if some genuinely support him? What if his technology protects them? What if removing Doom destabilizes an entire society? Those complications can make the conflict feel more mature. The Wakandan characters are perfectly positioned to understand those stakes because Wakanda combines superhero power with national sovereignty. Shuri is not merely someone wearing a powerful suit. She is connected to the leadership and future of a nation. M'Baku similarly represents political and cultural responsibility. Namor represents another civilization whose survival drives his choices. If Doom is presented as a ruler, these characters may perceive him differently from heroes who only see a supervillain. They understand that attacking a leader can have consequences for millions of people. That could create tension with more direct heroes. Thor also understands monarchy from his history in Asgard. Suddenly Doom's status as ruler gives him connections to several characters beyond Reed Richards. That is the kind of layered writing that could justify the enormous ensemble. Every major character should have a different reason to care about the same antagonist. The action design could then reflect those perspectives. Imagine a battle where Sam Wilson's objective is evacuation, Shuri's objective is disabling technology, Reed's objective is understanding a device, Thor's objective is containing an overwhelming energy source, Cyclops' objective is coordinating defensive positions, and Loki's objective is discovering Doom's hidden plan. The audience can follow multiple objectives because each belongs to a recognizable character. A giant fight becomes storytelling rather than noise. The Russo brothers have previously demonstrated an understanding of this principle. The airport battle in Civil War worked because each character had a personal or tactical reason to be there, and the action constantly expressed personality. Spider-Man talked while fighting. Ant-Man became Giant Man. Black Panther relentlessly pursued Bucky. Natasha made decisions based on shifting loyalty. Vision's power created danger even when he did not intend it. Doomsday has the opportunity to scale that philosophy up enormously. The challenge will be visual clarity. Modern superhero films can lose audiences when effects become too dense. If dozens of characters are flying, teleporting, stretching, blasting energy and changing size simultaneously, the viewer needs strong geography. We need to understand where everyone is, what they are trying to accomplish and what happens if they fail. Cinematography and editing become as important as visual effects. The camera should not simply shake while digital objects collide. Each power should have weight. Thor's lightning should feel different from Cyclops' optic blast. Sue Storm's force field should have a different visual logic from Wakandan shields. Magneto manipulating metal should transform the environment in ways that affect everyone else. Johnny Storm's fire should alter visibility and movement. Nightcrawler's teleportation should create rhythm. Shang-Chi's rings should create controlled kinetic patterns. Ant-Man's size changes should alter perspective. If these abilities interact, the film can create sequences that genuinely feel unprecedented. The music will also carry enormous responsibility. Avengers movies have a powerful musical identity because the Avengers theme became associated with collective heroism. But Doomsday contains characters with their own cinematic histories. The X-Men have musical associations. Fantastic Four have their own identity. Wakanda has one of Marvel's most distinctive musical worlds. Thor has moved through different musical styles across his films. Doctor Doom will need a theme capable of standing beside these established identities. A strong score could weave motifs together without turning the soundtrack into a collection of references. Imagine the Avengers motif appearing only when characters finally choose to operate as one team. Used carefully, that musical moment could carry enormous emotional power. The film should earn, "Avengers Assemble," rather than treat the phrase as an automatic applause button. Endgame made that moment powerful because audiences had waited years to hear Steve say it completely. Doomsday cannot recreate that exact experience. It needs its own defining moment. Perhaps Sam becomes the person who unites the coalition. Perhaps multiple leaders independently choose cooperation. Perhaps the Avengers name evolves into something larger. Whatever happens, the emotional climax should emerge from the movie's specific conflict rather than attempting to reproduce Endgame beat for beat. That is arguably Doomsday's biggest creative danger. Comparison with Endgame. Avengers. Endgame was not merely financially enormous, it functioned as a conclusion to a decade-long story. Doomsday cannot recreate the circumstances that made Endgame culturally unique, and it should not try. Its job is different. It must establish a new center of gravity for a Marvel universe that has expanded dramatically. The question is no longer whether the original Avengers can defeat the villain. The question is whether an entire collection of disconnected Marvel worlds can become something coherent. Dr. Doom may be the character who forces that transformation. If so, his victory does not necessarily need to mean that every hero is physically defeated. He could win by proving the existing structure cannot survive. That would naturally create momentum toward Avengers: Secret Wars, officially scheduled to follow in 2027. Because Secret Wars already exists on Marvel's release calendar, audiences know Doomsday will not be the final word on this conflict. That creates a structural challenge. The movie cannot depend entirely on uncertainty about whether another chapter exists. We know another Avengers film is coming. Therefore, suspense must come from what the world looks like when Doomsday ends. Which relationships survive? Which alliances form? Which assumptions collapse? What does Doom accomplish? What price do the heroes pay? Those questions can remain unpredictable even when the existence of a sequel is known. Infinity War demonstrated this brilliantly. Everyone knew another Avengers movie was scheduled, but the snap still shocked audiences because the emotional and structural consequences were enormous. Doomsday needs an ending with its own identity rather than simply repeating the disappearance of half the cast. A different kind of catastrophe would be more effective. Perhaps the heroes survive but reality changes. Perhaps Doom gains something more valuable than a conventional victory. Perhaps characters become separated in ways that redefine alliances. These remain speculative possibilities, but the key analytical point is that Doomsday's ending needs to change the rules. Secret Wars should feel impossible without what happens here. At the same time, Doomsday must contain enough resolution to function as a movie. A two-film structure works when the first installment tells a meaningful story with a devastating conclusion, not when it stops halfway through an unfinished scene. The Russo brothers know this from Infinity War. Thanos completed his objective. The film ended tragically, but it ended. Doomsday needs a comparable sense of dramatic completion even if the larger saga continues. Another crucial factor is pacing. A cast this large naturally creates pressure for a long runtime, but length alone does not solve storytelling problems. 3 hours can feel short when every scene advances character and plot. 2 hours can feel exhausting when scenes exist only to introduce cameos. The opening act will be particularly difficult. Marvel cannot spend 40 minutes introducing every character individually. Many viewers already know them, but not every viewer has watched every preceding project. The screenplay needs elegant reintroduction. A few lines of dialogue and a clear action can remind us who someone is without summarizing their entire history. For example, showing Sam making a difficult leadership decision tells us more than an exposition speech about his past. Showing Reed solving an impossible problem establishes his intellect. Showing Magneto protect mutants establishes his priorities. Showing Thor in a quiet moment with personal stakes reminds us that he is more than a weapon. Showing Doom make one calculated decision can establish his danger. Characterization through action will be essential. Humor must also be carefully controlled. The MCU is known for comedy, but Doomsday's title and villain suggest a darker level of threat. Humor should come from personality rather than interrupting dramatic moments. Scott Lang can naturally be funny because of who he is. Yelena's bluntness can create humor. Johnny Storm can bring a different energy. Thor can be funny without becoming unaware of danger. But Doom should not be constantly undercut by jokes if Marvel wants audiences to fear him. One of the reasons Thanos remained threatening was that the movie allowed his presence to carry weight. Characters could joke elsewhere, but Thanos himself was treated seriously. Doom deserves similar discipline. Robert Downey Jr. is famously charismatic and funny, which makes restraint even more important. The easiest version of the performance would allow familiar Tony-like humor to emerge. The more interesting version would weaponize Downey's charisma differently. Doom could be charming without being comedic. He could speak calmly while saying terrifying things. He could make characters want to listen even when they know he is dangerous. Charisma is particularly effective in authoritarian villains because it explains why people follow them. If Doom can persuade as effectively as he can threaten, the heroes face a much more complicated enemy. Reed Richards may be the one person who recognizes exactly how dangerous that persuasion is. Their rivalry could then become not just, who is smarter, but, whose vision of humanity deserves to survive. Reed believes discovery and cooperation can improve life. Doom believes his superior intelligence entitles him to decide how life should operate. That is a conflict worthy of an Avengers event. Sue Storm could become vital because she understands Reed as a person rather than merely admiring his intellect. She can identify when his obsession is pulling him away from what matters. Ben Grimm can challenge Reed emotionally. Johnny can challenge him through impulsiveness. The Fantastic Four work best as a family, and Doomsday should preserve that identity even when placing them beside dozens of heroes. If they become four generic Avengers, something important will be lost. The same is true for the X-Men. They should feel like X-Men, not simply superheroes who happen to possess mutant powers. Their history, loyalty and worldview should shape their choices. Wakandans should remain connected to Wakanda. Namor should remain connected to his people. The crossover becomes exciting precisely because different worlds retain their identities while interacting. Homogenizing everyone would make the movie smaller rather than larger. This is why Doomsday represents such an important test for Marvel Studios. The MCU expanded successfully for years by making separate franchises feel connected while preserving distinct tones. Guardians of the Galaxy did not feel like Captain America. Black Panther did not feel like Ant-Man. Doctor Strange introduced different visual and mystical ideas. Thor moved into cosmic fantasy. Avengers movies brought these elements together. Doomsday must now perform that function at an even greater scale, incorporating cinematic histories that were once outside the MCU's central structure. If it succeeds, the Marvel Universe could feel genuinely unified without feeling uniform. If it fails, audiences may see only a crowded collection of intellectual property. The difference will come down to character. Why does Sam trust Reed? Why does Reed listen to Shuri? Why does Magneto cooperate with Avengers? Why does Thor care about this particular crisis? Why does Loki involve himself? Why does Namor remain? Why does Bucky fight? Why does Yelena risk herself? Why does Doom believe he should rule? Those questions matter more than how many portals appear in the final battle. The best superhero movies make extraordinary powers serve understandable human motivations. Even Doom needs a human core. His ambition should come from somewhere. His arrogance should protect some deeper wound or conviction. His obsession with Reed should reveal something about how he views himself. His desire for control should reflect what he fears about chaos. If Robert Downey Jr. and the Russos can find that core, Doom could become one of Marvel's most memorable antagonists. The role offers Downey an opportunity to create a character almost opposite to Tony Stark while using some of the same qualities that made Tony compelling: intelligence, charisma, ego and emotional complexity. The difference lies in what those qualities serve. Tony gradually learned to sacrifice himself for others. Doom can represent intelligence and ego that never surrender control. Tony's final act in Endgame was accepting death to save everyone else. Doom's defining flaw could be an inability to accept that anyone else should determine the future. That contrast exists even if the movie never explicitly compares the two characters. Audiences will feel it because Downey carries Tony's history with him. This may ultimately be the smartest reason to cast him. Marvel is not merely asking viewers to accept a familiar actor in a new role. It is potentially using our emotional memory of a hero to make a villain more unsettling. We instinctively trust Downey's face in a Marvel movie. Doom can exploit that trust at the audience level. If the performance is sufficiently different, the moment we realize we no longer see Tony could be one of the film's greatest achievements. Avengers Doomsday therefore has a unique opportunity. It can use nostalgia without being controlled by nostalgia, spectacle without sacrificing character, and a massive cast without losing thematic focus. The confirmed returns of Steve Rogers, Thor and veteran X-Men characters guarantee that memory will be part of the experience, while the presence of Sam Wilson, Shang-Chi, Shuri, the Fantastic Four, the new Avengers and other newer heroes pushes the franchise forward. Dr. Doom stands between those eras. Robert Downey Jr. represents Marvel's past, but Victor Von Doom can become central to its future. That contradiction is at the heart of the movie's appeal. Doomsday is bringing back familiar faces, but the film cannot survive by looking backward. Its real mission is to transform Marvel's enormous collection of heroes into the foundation for whatever comes next. If the story gives each major faction a reason to exist, allows its leaders to disagree, treats Doom as an intelligent ideological threat, creates action around character-specific abilities, and builds an ending that genuinely changes the universe, Avengers Doomsday could become much more than the bridge to Secret Wars. It could become the movie that defines what an Avengers story means after the original Avengers era has ended. And that may be the most important challenge facing the film. Audiences already know what it felt like when Tony Stark, Steve Rogers, Thor, Hulk, Black Widow and Hawkeye stood together. Marvel cannot simply manufacture that feeling again by increasing the number of characters on screen. A new Avengers era needs new relationships, new conflicts and new emotional reasons for people to stand together. Doomsday has assembled the pieces. The question that will ultimately determine its success is whether those pieces become a team before Victor Von Doom proves that they were never truly united at all. Avengers Doomsday becomes much more interesting when we stop looking at it as a conventional superhero reunion and start examining the larger problem Marvel Studios has now officially placed at the center of the film. Worlds are colliding. That idea changes almost everything about how this movie can function. Kevin Feige has publicly described the fun of Doomsday as bringing together the Fantastic Four, Avengers and X-Men while dealing with the threat of worlds literally colliding, and that detail gives us one of the clearest legitimate windows into the scale of the story without relying on leaks or fabricated plot summaries. A collision between worlds is not simply another invasion of Earth. It is not the Battle of New York with more heroes, and it is not automatically another version of Thanos collecting objects before a final confrontation. A threat involving entire worlds immediately creates questions about survival, responsibility, loyalty and impossible choices. If two realities cannot continue existing in the same space, then defeating an enemy may not be enough. The heroes may have to determine what they are willing to protect, what they are willing to risk and whether they can trust people who come from completely different worlds. That is where Doomsday has the potential to become a genuinely fascinating Avengers movie. The Fantastic Four are especially important because Marvel has already established them as heroes coming from a distinctive world with its own identity, technology and history. Their arrival in an Avengers event therefore carries more narrative significance than simply adding 4 recognizable superheroes to a roster. Reed Richards, Sue Storm, Johnny Storm and Ben Grimm bring an entire worldview with them. Their experiences have shaped the way they understand science, family, exploration and catastrophe. When they encounter Avengers and X-Men characters, the interaction should not feel like everyone has always occupied the same social circle. There should be discovery. There should be uncertainty. There should even be misunderstanding. Kevin Feige has specifically talked about the enjoyment of seeing these very different personalities interact, and that may ultimately become one of Doomsday's strongest qualities. The best crossover scenes are rarely the scenes where everyone immediately agrees. They are the scenes where characters discover how differently other heroes think. Reed Richards could walk into a room containing some of the greatest minds and most experienced warriors in Marvel history and still believe he can solve the central problem through calculation. That confidence is one of his strengths, but under the right circumstances it can become dangerous. Reed's intelligence allows him to see possibilities that other people cannot, yet extreme intelligence can create emotional distance. When someone thinks in probabilities involving entire worlds, individual lives can begin appearing like numbers in an equation. Sam Wilson would approach that problem from almost the opposite direction. Sam's value has never depended on being the smartest scientist or strongest fighter in the room. His strength is understanding people. He can look at a strategic problem and remember that the numbers represent actual human beings. That difference alone could create meaningful tension between the Avengers and Fantastic Four without making either character unreasonable. Reed may say that one course of action offers the highest probability of saving reality. Sam may ask who pays the price. Shuri may challenge Reed's calculations technologically. Thor may question whether the scientific model accounts for cosmic forces Reed has never encountered. Loki may recognize something about reality that no conventional instrument can measure. Professor Xavier may understand the psychological consequences of whatever decision is being considered. Magneto may reject the entire conversation if he believes mutants are being asked to sacrifice themselves for another world. Doctor Doom could observe all of this and realize that he does not need to destroy the Alliance himself. He only needs to create a situation where every faction believes survival requires a different answer. That is the kind of threat worthy of Victor Von Doom. Physical power matters in superhero cinema, but strategy becomes more important when the heroes outnumber the villain. Doomsday has an enormous confirmed ensemble. If Doom simply walks into an open field and tries to defeat every hero through strength, the movie risks turning him into a video game boss. A much more compelling Doom would control the conditions of the conflict. He could determine where battles happen, what information each team receives and which choices appear available. A master strategist does not fight 20 superheroes simultaneously if he can convince 10 of them that the other 10 are the problem. That approach would also allow the film to make its title meaningful. Doomsday does not have to describe one giant explosion. It could describe the gradual realization that every available choice leads toward catastrophe. The heroes may spend much of the movie believing they are preventing the end, only to discover that their actions have been moving them toward it. Again, that is an analytical possibility rather than a confirmed plot description, but it demonstrates why the officially acknowledged collision of worlds creates much richer dramatic territory than a straightforward invasion. The Baxter Building could become one of the most important locations in this structure. Feige has specifically noted that a set which normally held only a few Fantastic Four characters becomes much more crowded in Doomsday. That detail may sound small, but it tells us something important about the movie's character dynamics. The Baxter Building is not simply another headquarters. It belongs to the Fantastic Four. Bringing Avengers and other characters into that space means bringing outsiders into the family's home and intellectual center. Imagine what that does to Reed. He is accustomed to being one of the dominant scientific authorities in his environment. Suddenly he may have Wakandan technology, Avengers experience, mutant perspectives and cosmic knowledge entering his workspace. He may welcome that collaboration, or he may struggle when other people challenge his conclusions. Sue Storm could become essential in keeping those personalities functional. Sue is often underestimated when audiences focus only on Reed's intellect or Johnny and Ben's more immediately visible personalities. But a strong version of Sue is the emotional and strategic center of the Fantastic Four. She understands Reed's strengths without being intimidated by them. She understands Johnny's impulsiveness and Ben's emotional burdens. When outsiders enter the family's world, Sue can become the person capable of translating between groups. That would make Vanessa Kirby's role potentially crucial in an ensemble where communication may be as important as combat. Sue's powers also have extraordinary tactical potential. Invisibility is useful, but her force fields make her one of the most versatile members of the team. She can protect people, isolate threats, control space and potentially contain forces that would overwhelm conventional defenses. In a story about worlds colliding, defensive abilities could matter as much as destructive ones. Johnny Storm brings another dynamic. Joseph Quinn's Human Torch has the kind of power that naturally produces spectacular action, but Johnny is most valuable when his personality creates contrast with more serious characters. Put Johnny beside Bucky Barnes and their energies are completely different. Put him beside Thor and you have two powerful characters with dramatically different relationships to confidence. Put him beside Yelena and there is obvious potential for sharp dialogue. Put him beside Cyclops and the contrast between impulsive instinct and disciplined battlefield leadership becomes immediately visible. These combinations matter because crossover movies need fresh chemistry. Audiences have already seen many combinations among established Avengers. Doomsday can create something new by pairing characters who would never normally share a movie. Ben Grimm may be the easiest Fantastic Four character to integrate emotionally because his power comes with a visible personal cost. The Thing can perform extraordinary feats of strength, but he cannot simply remove his condition when the battle ends. That gives Ben a grounded humanity despite his appearance. He can stand beside gods, mutants, kings and super soldiers while still reacting like someone who understands ordinary frustration and loyalty. His presence alongside Wakandan characters in Marvel's official teaser material is particularly interesting because Wakanda is a place where technology, identity and tradition coexist. Ben represents a person whose physical identity was transformed by extraordinary science. Shuri might look at his condition as a scientific problem. Ben may not want to be treated like a problem that needs solving. That simple difference could create an excellent character scene without requiring any giant action sequence. This is exactly the type of writing Doomsday needs. When a film has this many heroes, not every memorable interaction should involve fighting. Sometimes two characters sitting in a room and discovering that they fundamentally disagree can make the later battle more meaningful. The X-Men add another level because their relationship with power is different from that of the Avengers and Fantastic Four. Avengers generally choose to become heroes or accept responsibilities created by extraordinary circumstances. The Fantastic Four are a family transformed by exploration. Mutants traditionally exist with their abilities as part of who they are. That difference shapes how they respond to threats. If worlds are colliding and populations begin fearing people from another reality, the X-Men may recognize patterns that other heroes initially overlook. Professor Xavier understands what fear can do to societies. Magneto understands it too, but reaches very different conclusions. This could become extremely important if the crisis creates refugees or displaced populations. Imagine entire communities discovering that their world may disappear. Governments panic. People blame outsiders. Heroes from another universe arrive. Suddenly the conflict is not only cosmic, it becomes social and political. Xavier might argue for cooperation. Magneto might immediately prepare for the possibility that cooperation will fail. Sam Wilson could understand both perspectives while attempting to prevent violence. Doom could exploit the panic by presenting himself as the only leader capable of imposing stability. That would make him frightening without requiring him to attack anyone. A population facing extinction may voluntarily accept authoritarian control if Doom convinces them that freedom is a luxury they can no longer afford. This is where Dr. Doom's status as a ruler could distinguish him from previous Avengers villains. Loki wanted to rule Earth in the Avengers, but his conquest was direct and theatrical. Ultron wanted to force evolution through destruction. Thanos believed mass death would restore balance. Doom can offer something more seductive, survival through obedience. He can say that the heroes have failed because they argue, hesitate and prioritize individual morality over universal necessity. He can point to collapsing worlds and claim that democracy, cooperation and personal freedom are inefficient responses to extinction. If the film allows him to make that argument convincingly, the heroes cannot defeat him simply by proving he is evil. They must demonstrate that his solution is worse than the crisis. That gives every major faction a reason to matter. Sam Wilson can represent moral leadership. Reed Richards can represent scientific responsibility. Xavier can represent coexistence. Magneto can represent the danger of allowing fear to override trust. Shuri can represent technological responsibility combined with political leadership. Thor can represent someone who has already watched a civilization destroyed and rebuilt. Loki can represent someone who has learned the cost of seeking control. Bucky can represent personal freedom after years of manipulation. Yelena can represent the individual life hidden inside enormous geopolitical decisions. Namor can represent a leader who will protect his people even when doing so places him against everyone else. Doom becomes the extreme endpoint where protection transforms into domination. Namor may therefore be one of the most fascinating characters in the movie. Tainich Huerta Mejia's Namor is not easily categorized as hero or villain. His decisions are guided by Talokan. That makes him perfect for a story where worlds or civilizations may be forced into competition. If Avengers tell Namor that cooperation is necessary, he may cooperate only as long as cooperation protects his people. If Reed proposes a plan carrying even a small risk to Talokan, Namor may reject it. If Doom offers guaranteed protection in exchange for allegiance, Namor may at least listen before deciding whether Doom can be trusted. None of this requires Namor to become evil. It simply requires him to remain consistent. Characters with conflicting responsibilities make ensemble stories stronger because the audience understands why unity is difficult. M'Baku and Shuri bring their own responsibilities. Wakanda has repeatedly faced the question of how much it owes the wider world. Its technology makes it powerful, but power creates expectations. In a crisis beyond national borders, Wakanda could become a crucial source of resources and knowledge. Yet opening those resources to heroes from different worlds could carry enormous risks. What happens if Reed wants access to Wakandan technology? What happens if an X-Man possesses information Wakanda needs? What happens if Doom understands vibranium better than anyone expects? These questions allow the movie to create intellectual suspense rather than relying entirely on physical danger. The audience should occasionally wonder whether a decision is correct before discovering whether it works. That is what makes strategic storytelling engaging. Shang-Chi can also become more significant if the movie connects ancient power with modern science. The Ten Rings remain one of the most visually and conceptually unusual weapons associated with an MCU hero. They do not behave like conventional technology, and their deeper history has left room for future exploration. Doomsday does not necessarily need to answer every mystery surrounding them, but an event involving realities could provide an opportunity to place Shang-Chi in conversations with characters who might recognize something about their nature. Reed could analyze them scientifically. Shuri could detect properties no one previously understood. Thor or Loki could recognize similarities to cosmic or mystical forces. The important thing is not to assume an unconfirmed explanation but to recognize the storytelling potential. Shang-Chi deserves to be more than another fighter in a crowd. His skill set can become part of the solution if the screenplay gives the rings a meaningful function. Simu Liu's presence also represents one of Marvel's newer generations finally participating in a full Avengers-scale event. That matters because Doomsday cannot depend entirely on returning icons. If every decisive moment belongs to Steve, Thor, older X-Men and Robert Downey Jr., newer characters risk appearing like supporting guests in their own era. The movie must balance nostalgia with succession. Sam Wilson should matter because he is Captain America now. Shang-Chi should matter because his journey is continuing. Shuri should matter because she carries Wakanda's future. Yelena should matter because she belongs to a newer team. Louis Pullman's Bob should matter because his extraordinary abilities introduce a completely different level of power. Danny Ramirez's Joaquin Torres should matter as part of the emerging heroic generation. Wyatt Russell's John Walker should matter because his interpretation of heroism differs from Sam's. The movie becomes more meaningful if old heroes and new heroes learn from one another rather than simply sharing the screen. John Walker is particularly useful for examining leadership because he demonstrates what happens when symbols are treated as assignments rather than responsibilities. Sam Wilson understands the moral weight of Captain America differently from Walker. Steve Rogers' return adds another layer to that contrast. Three men connected to the Captain America legacy could potentially exist in the same larger story environment, each representing a different relationship with authority and duty. Steve became Captain America because his character mattered before his strength. Sam accepted the identity only after wrestling with what the symbol meant. Walker initially approached the role through institutional authority and military achievement. Dr. Doom represents authority taken to its absolute extreme. This means a seemingly simple superhero movie could contain a surprisingly coherent thematic conversation about who deserves power. The same conversation exists through Reed and Doom. Reed has extraordinary intelligence but must learn that intelligence does not entitle him to control everyone. Doom possesses extraordinary intelligence and believes precisely the opposite. Xavier possesses enormous mental power but traditionally establishes ethical limits around how he uses it. Magneto possesses immense power and believes restraint can become dangerous when enemies threaten his people. Thor was born into royal power but has spent much of his life learning humility. Loki once wanted a throne and eventually learned responsibility through suffering. Shuri inherited political and heroic responsibilities after devastating loss. Namor rules because he sees himself as protector of his civilization. Sam carries a symbol of leadership without being a king at all. Doomsday therefore contains a remarkable collection of characters whose stories revolve around different forms of power. If the screenplay recognizes that pattern, the movie can feel thematically unified despite its huge cast. Power without responsibility becomes doom. Responsibility without sufficient power becomes helplessness. The heroes must find a balance between those extremes. The collision of worlds then becomes more than a visual event. It becomes a pressure test. When survival is easy, moral principles are easy to defend. When survival appears impossible, characters reveal what they truly believe. Would Reed sacrifice one world to save another if mathematics said it was necessary? Would Sam allow it? Would Xavier? Would Magneto if the surviving world protected mutants? Would Namor if Talokan survived? Would Doom make the decision immediately and call everyone else weak for hesitating? These are exactly the kinds of impossible questions that can elevate an Avengers film beyond spectacle. Marvel's comic history contains stories exploring collisions between universes and the extreme decisions heroes make in response, but the movie should not be assumed to reproduce those stories exactly. Cinema adaptations frequently rearrange characters, motivations and outcomes. What matters for analysis is that Marvel's own description of worlds colliding naturally creates this moral territory. The visual possibilities are equally enormous. A world collision should not look like a generic portal. Audiences need to feel that two realities have distinct identities. Architecture could overlap. Skies could change. Gravity could behave unpredictably. Technology from one reality could malfunction under the physical conditions of another. Entire landscapes could appear where they do not belong. Familiar locations could become fused with unfamiliar ones. The danger could escalate gradually, allowing the audience to understand what is happening before the full catastrophe arrives. Visual storytelling is crucial because exposition about universes can quickly become confusing. If characters spend 10 minutes standing around a hologram explaining dimensions, the movie may lose momentum. The audience should see the consequences. Show a street where buildings from two worlds occupy the same physical space. Show people displaced by a boundary they cannot understand. Show heroes trying to rescue civilians while scientists search for a larger solution. Then the cosmic concept becomes emotionally understandable. The Fantastic Four's retro-futuristic world provides a perfect contrast with the established MCU aesthetic. If elements from that world begin appearing alongside Wakanda or modern Earth, audiences can instantly understand that boundaries are collapsing. The X-Men may come with another visual identity depending on how their reality is presented. Doom himself should have an environment that feels uniquely his. This could allow Doomsday to become one of Marvel's most visually diverse movies without relying on random locations. Every environment would communicate which world or faction is involved. Production design could therefore perform narrative work normally handled by dialogue. Costumes matter for the same reason. When the Avengers, Fantastic Four and X-Men stand together, they should not look like members of one uniform organization. Their differences are the point. The image of these teams together should feel impossible. That visual contrast creates excitement before anyone speaks. The X-Men carry decades of cinematic recognition. Fantastic Four have a newer MCU visual identity. Avengers characters represent multiple generations. Doom's armor can stand apart from all of them. A well-composed frame containing these groups could communicate Marvel history in a single image. But the filmmakers must resist overcrowding every frame. Sometimes the best way to communicate scale is to isolate characters. A quiet shot of Steve Rogers seeing heroes he has never met could carry more emotional power than a giant lineup. Thor meeting the Fantastic Four could remind us how far the universe has expanded since his first arrival on Earth. Magneto seeing Wakanda could create an unspoken reaction based on his understanding of a powerful protected society. Reed meeting Loki could immediately create intellectual curiosity. These moments are valuable because they allow the audience to experience the crossover through the characters. The movie should not behave as if everyone already knows they are famous Marvel superheroes. To them, many of these people are strangers. That difference between audience knowledge and character knowledge can create excellent scenes. Imagine Sam Wilson hearing the name, Fantastic Four, for the first time. To viewers, the name is iconic. To Sam, it may sound unusual. Imagine Ben Grimm hearing that Thor is literally the Norse god of thunder. Imagine X-Men characters learning that another universe has experienced alien invasions and a population erasing snap. Imagine Avengers learning what mutants have experienced. Every introduction can reveal character if handled efficiently. The danger is exposition overload. Doomsday cannot pause for every character to explain their entire biography. The solution is selective storytelling. Characters only need to reveal information relevant to the current conflict. If Magneto distrusts a plan, a single line referencing his history may communicate enough. If Reed needs Wakandan technology, Shuri's response can reveal both characters without a history lesson. If Thor recognizes a cosmic phenomenon, his experience can emerge naturally through action. The Russo brothers have handled this before. Infinity War introduced the Guardians of the Galaxy to Thor, then brought some Guardians together with Iron Man, Spider-Man and Doctor Strange. Those scenes were entertaining because personalities collided immediately. Star-Lord felt threatened by Thor. Tony and Strange competed intellectually. Spider-Man reacted enthusiastically to everything. The movie did not stop to provide biographies. Character behavior communicated identity. Doomsday needs that same efficiency on a larger scale. One particularly interesting possibility is conflict between Reed Richards and Shuri. Both are extraordinary scientists, but their knowledge developed in radically different environments. Reed's world embraces a specific kind of futuristic exploration. Shuri's knowledge emerges from Wakanda's unique technological history and vibranium. Neither should simply be declared smarter. That kind of ranking is less interesting than showing different methods. Reed may approach a problem theoretically. Shuri may approach it experimentally. One may notice something the other misses because their assumptions differ. Collaboration becomes stronger when each person contributes unique knowledge. Dr. Doom can then stand as the dangerous opposite, a genius who collaborates only when collaboration serves his control. Doom does not want to discover that someone else knows more. He wants to prove that no one else deserves to decide. His relationship with Reed becomes especially powerful if Reed initially shares some of Doom's intellectual arrogance. Reed can defeat Doom philosophically only if he learns something Doom refuses to learn. Being the smartest person in the room does not make you infallible. Sue could be essential to that realization. The Fantastic Four are not great because Reed solves everything. They are great because Reed has a family capable of challenging him. Doom may have followers, soldiers and subjects, but he does not have that same relationship. He demands loyalty rather than earning honest disagreement. This difference could become the emotional heart of their rivalry. Doom sees disagreement as disobedience. Reed eventually understands disagreement can protect him from his own mistakes. The Avengers operate similarly. Their greatest victories often emerge from different heroes contributing what one leader cannot. Tony could not defeat Thanos alone. Steve could not. Thor could not. The final victory required an enormous network of sacrifices and decisions. Doom may interpret that dependence as weakness. The movie can argue that dependence is actually strength. Xavier's X-Men embody the same idea. Their powers are dramatically different, but the team succeeds through coordination. Cyclops becomes important because coordination is his specialty. James Marsden's return gives Marvel an opportunity to show why Cyclops deserves respect as a leader. Scott does not need to overpower Thor to matter. He needs to understand a battlefield faster than everyone else. He can direct characters whose abilities interact strategically. Magneto can manipulate the environment. Nightcrawler can reposition allies instantly. Professor X can provide information. Cyclops can turn those abilities into a plan. If the Avengers initially underestimate him because they do not know him, a successful tactical sequence could establish his credibility without exposition. The same applies to M'Baku. Physical courage and political experience can make him valuable even in a room filled with superhuman scientists. Doomsday should repeatedly demonstrate that usefulness is not measured only by power level. Otherwise, the movie creates a serious problem around characters with overwhelming abilities. If the strongest person can simply solve everything, why are ordinary human heroes present? The answer should be that the crisis requires different kinds of strength. Sam cannot overpower Thor, but Thor may need Sam's leadership. Yelena cannot outfight Doom, but she may notice human behavior that Reed overlooks. Bucky may understand infiltration or psychological manipulation. Scott Lang may understand unusual physical phenomena. Johnny Storm may reach a location others cannot. Sue may protect people from an attack no one can stop. Ben may hold something together long enough for others to act. Every hero should have at least one moment where removing them would change the outcome. That is the mark of a successful ensemble. Doctor Doom's plan should ideally require this diversity to defeat. If Reed alone can solve it, the Avengers and X-Men become decoration. If Thor alone can destroy it, scientists become unnecessary. If Professor X can simply read Doom's mind and reveal everything, suspense disappears. The screenplay needs obstacles specifically designed to prevent easy solutions. Doom should know who these people are and prepare for their abilities. Perhaps technology blocks one power while exposing vulnerability to another. Perhaps political consequences prevent direct attack. Perhaps heroes are separated across realities. Perhaps Doom provides information that is technically true but deliberately incomplete. The exact mechanics remain unknown, but preparation is how the film can demonstrate Doom's intelligence. He should feel dangerous before he personally wins a fight. The audience should begin worrying whenever the heroes believe they have solved the problem because Doom has taught us to expect another layer. That does not mean endless twists. Too many twists become meaningless. It means establishing a pattern of strategic foresight. Doom makes a move, heroes counter it. We discover Doom anticipated the counter. Eventually the heroes win not by becoming smarter than Doom individually, but by doing something he cannot predict because he does not understand their relationships. That would be thematically satisfying. Doom understands systems but underestimates trust. He calculates powers but misunderstands sacrifice. He expects self-interest but encounters loyalty. A villain's defeat should emerge from his character flaw, not random luck. Thanos lost in Endgame partly because his arrogance and brutality created enemies willing to sacrifice everything. Doom's downfall could similarly emerge from his need for control. The more tightly he controls every variable, the less prepared he may be for people choosing irrationally compassionate actions. Steve Rogers has historically embodied exactly that kind of choice. Steve will stand against impossible odds even when mathematics says he cannot win. His return could therefore have thematic value beyond nostalgia. Reed may calculate probability. Doom may calculate probability. Steve can look at the same numbers and decide that abandoning people is unacceptable. Sam carries that moral tradition forward. If both Captain Americas influence the larger coalition, the Avengers can become the force that refuses Doom's premise. Doom says someone must decide who survives. The Avengers say they will keep searching for a way to save everyone. Whether they succeed is another matter, but the moral decision defines them. Thor understands that mentality because his greatest failures came when he believed raw power guaranteed victory. By Endgame, he had learned that heroism includes continuing after failure. That experience could make him unusually compassionate toward heroes who make mistakes during Doomsday. Imagine Reed makes a catastrophic calculation. Thor could condemn him, but a more mature Thor might understand what guilt does to a person. That creates character growth without requiring a long subplot. Loki brings another perspective on failure. He has failed repeatedly, reinvented himself repeatedly and confronted versions of himself that forced him to question whether identity is fixed. A multiversal crisis naturally resonates with that experience. Loki may understand better than most that encountering another version of a person does not erase what makes each individual distinct. This could become relevant in a movie where familiar faces appear in unfamiliar roles. Robert Downey Jr. playing Victor Von Doom creates exactly that emotional confusion for the audience. We see a face associated with Tony Stark but are told this is Victor Von Doom. Loki's broader experience with identity and variance could provide thematic context without the movie needing to turn Doom into a Tony variant. Marvel has officially identified Downey's character as Victor Von Doom, and analysis should respect that rather than assuming an unconfirmed twist. The more powerful approach may actually be refusing to make Doom secretly Tony. Let Victor be Victor. Let the audience's memory create discomfort without allowing the characters to simplify him into someone they already knew. Downey then has to build an entirely new presence. Doom should enter a room differently from Tony. Tony often filled silence because he disliked surrendering control of a conversation. Doom could control silence itself. Tony frequently used humor defensively. Doom may not need that defense. Tony displayed insecurity beneath confidence. Doom could display certainty so absolute that insecurity only appears in very specific moments, perhaps around Reed. Tony wanted people to recognize his brilliance. Doom might assume recognition is inevitable. These performance distinctions can make the casting work. Costume and sound can reinforce them. Doom's footsteps, armor movement and voice should create an atmosphere before his face is visible. His mask should not feel like something the film is desperate to remove so audiences can see the famous actor. Keeping Downey behind the mask for substantial periods could actually strengthen the character. When the mask comes off, if it does, the moment should matter. The same principle applies to action. Doom should not fight like Iron Man. Even if both characters use advanced armor, their movement philosophies should differ. Tony's armor evolved around speed, adaptability and improvisation. Doom's armor could feel heavier, more deliberate and almost ceremonial. Every movement could communicate that he expects the world to move around him. If mystical elements become part of his cinematic abilities, the contrast becomes even greater. Science and sorcery together make Doom difficult to categorize, which means different heroes may initially misunderstand what they are fighting. Reed may assume technology explains everything. Thor may sense something beyond technology. Loki may recognize magic. Shuri may detect impossible energy patterns. The heroes need one another because no single discipline can explain Doom. That is an elegant way to justify the crossover. The collision of worlds could similarly resist one explanation. Perhaps it appears scientific from one perspective and cosmic from another. Different characters possess different pieces of the truth. The central mystery becomes assembling those pieces before Doom accomplishes his objective. This would give the first half of the movie a thriller quality rather than immediately launching into non-stop destruction. The Winter Soldier demonstrated that the Russos can handle conspiracy and mystery alongside superhero action. Bringing some of that tension into Doomsday could help distinguish it from Infinity War and Endgame. Imagine the heroes know worlds are destabilizing but do not initially know who is responsible or why. Different teams investigate separate symptoms. Their paths converge. They blame one another. Doom emerges only after alliances are already strained. That structure would allow characters to meet naturally rather than through a single recruitment montage. It would also give Doctor Doom an aura of mystery. Again, this is a possible storytelling approach, not a claim about the actual unreleased plot. What we can legitimately say is that the confirmed combination of Avengers, Fantastic Four, X-Men and colliding worlds creates the conditions for this kind of layered narrative. The marketing strategy may reveal more before release, but Marvel will likely protect the most important connections. That is wise. Event films become less exciting when trailers explain every surprise. Doomsday already has enough marketing hooks without revealing the entire story. Steve Rogers is returning. Thor is returning. Veteran X-Men characters are returning. Fantastic Four are involved. Robert Downey Jr. is Victor Von Doom. Those facts alone can sell the scale. The trailers can therefore focus on atmosphere and relationships rather than plot exposition. A shot of Reed looking at a collapsing reality may communicate more than a narrator explaining the multiverse. A brief exchange between Sam and Xavier could establish the crossover. Doom saying one carefully chosen sentence could establish his philosophy. Thor seeing something that frightens him could establish the stakes. Marketing should make audiences curious rather than fully informed. The December 18, 2026 theatrical date also positions the film as a major holiday event. Marvel's official site currently lists that date, and Avengers: Secret Wars follows on December 17, 2027. That one-year gap matters creatively because Doomsday can leave audiences with major unanswered consequences without forcing them to wait several years for continuation. Yet the film still needs to stand independently. A satisfying event movie can end with unresolved consequences while resolving its immediate dramatic arc. Perhaps the heroes fail at one objective but discover a new purpose. Perhaps Doom achieves what he wanted but loses something unexpected. Perhaps worlds change permanently. Whatever Marvel chooses, the ending should make the title feel earned. Doomsday suggests the moment when ordinary solutions stop working. The heroes should leave the movie fundamentally different from how they entered it. That change may be organizational. The Avengers could emerge with a new structure. It may be cosmic. Reality itself could change. It may be emotional. Characters who distrusted one another could become allies. It may be political. Nations and civilizations could reconsider their relationships. Ideally, several of these transformations happen together. Secret Wars can then explore the consequences rather than simply continuing the same battle. The existence of Secret Wars also means Doom may have a longer arc than a single villain appearance. That creates room for complexity. He does not need to reveal every aspect of himself immediately. Doomsday can establish his philosophy, relationship with Reed and larger ambition while leaving additional layers for the next film. But audiences still need enough characterization to care. A villain cannot remain mysterious to the point of emptiness. We should understand what Doom wants even if we do not understand every method. We should understand what he believes even if his history remains partially hidden. We should understand why heroes fear him even before we see his maximum power. The strongest villains are clear in motivation but unpredictable in execution. Thanos wanted the stones. Killmonger wanted to overturn a global power structure. Loki wanted rule and recognition. Zemo wanted to destroy the Avengers from within. Doom should have an equally understandable central objective. Destroy everything because he is evil would waste the character. A crisis involving colliding worlds gives him a perfect opportunity to present himself as savior rather than destroyer. Perhaps he believes only he can preserve existence. If so, his villainy emerges from the price he is willing to impose and the power he refuses to surrender. That is far more interesting than simple annihilation. The heroes may even need Doom temporarily. That would create another layer of tension. What if his technology or knowledge is essential to stopping the immediate collision? Can Reed work beside someone he despises? Can Sam accept help from a dictator if millions of lives depend on it? Can Magneto trust a ruler promising mutant survival? Can Thor fight alongside someone he knows may betray them? Temporary alliances with villains are a classic source of suspense because everyone knows cooperation has an expiration date. Doom would be especially effective in that role because he can genuinely contribute. He is not merely waiting for an opportunity to stab someone. He may actually solve problems no one else can solve, making his eventual betrayal or ideological conflict more painful. This would also demonstrate why Doom believes he deserves authority. If he repeatedly saves everyone when other heroes fail, his arrogance gains evidence. The audience may begin understanding why some people would follow him. That is dangerous territory in the best dramatic sense. A villain becomes more compelling when the audience can understand the path toward his conclusion without agreeing with it. Reed then has to confront the possibility that Doom is correct about some facts while catastrophically wrong about what those facts justify. That kind of conflict could define the movie. Sue can remind Reed that proving Doom mathematically wrong is not enough. Sam can remind everyone that survival without freedom may not count as victory. Xavier can argue that fear cannot determine the future. Magneto can challenge Xavier by pointing out that idealism has failed before. Namor can ask whether principles matter if his people die. Thor can remember that Asgard survived even after losing its physical home because Asgard was its people, not a place. That experience could become extremely relevant in a story about worlds. Thor has already learned that a civilization can survive the destruction of its homeland. Other leaders may not accept that answer. Namor might consider the loss of Talokan unacceptable regardless of whether some citizens survive elsewhere. Wakandans may feel similarly about Wakanda. Fantastic Four may refuse to abandon their world. Suddenly the phrase, "save the world," becomes complicated because there may be more than one world demanding salvation. This is where Doomsday can distinguish itself from nearly every previous Avengers movie. The original Avengers defended Earth. Age of Ultron defended Earth. Infinity War and Endgame expanded the stakes to the universe, but the moral objective remained straightforward: stop Thanos from killing people and restore those he erased. A collision of worlds could create a crisis where saving everyone appears physically impossible. The heroes must challenge the premise itself. That is a much more difficult story to write, but it offers enormous rewards. The audience should feel the weight of every decision. A scientist saying, "We have 12 minutes," should mean something because we understand what disappears when time runs out. Show families. Show cities. Show heroes protecting people they have never met. Show mutants rescuing ordinary humans who fear them. Show Wakandans opening resources to outsiders. Show Fantastic Four choosing strangers over their own safety. Show Avengers becoming Avengers through action rather than branding. These moments create emotional scale. Destruction alone does not. A million digital buildings collapsing can become visual noise. One character choosing to save one child while an entire reality collapses can make the catastrophe real. The Russo brothers understood this in their strongest Marvel work. Infinity War's biggest emotional moments were not the largest explosions. They were Gamora asking Peter to kill her if Thanos captured her, Wanda being forced to destroy Vision, Thor confronting Thanos after losing almost everything, and Peter telling Tony he did not want to go. Endgame's emotional power came from personal decisions inside cosmic stakes. Doomsday needs its own equivalent moments. Perhaps they belong to Reed and Sue. Perhaps Sam and Steve. Perhaps Thor. Perhaps Bucky. Perhaps Magneto and Xavier. Perhaps a newer character audiences do not expect. The important thing is that the screenplay earns emotion rather than assuming recognition equals attachment. Returning actors will generate applause, but applause is not the same as storytelling. Patrick Stewart appearing as Professor X is exciting. What Xavier does after appearing determines whether the role matters. Ian McKellen returning as Magneto carries decades of history. The movie should use that history to create a meaningful decision. James Marsden's Cyclops deserves more than firing an optic blast during a montage. Alan Cummings' Nightcrawler deserves more than teleporting into frame for nostalgia. Rebecca Romijn's Mystique can bring uncertainty and espionage if used intelligently. Kelsey Grammer's Beast can contribute scientific and diplomatic perspective. Channing Tatum's Gambit can bring personality and kinetic energy. Each returning character does not need a huge arc, but each needs purpose. The same standard should apply to newer heroes. Florence Pugh's Yelena should not exist only to make a joke. Sebastian Stan's Bucky should not exist only because Steve returns. Wyatt Russell's Walker should not simply be another shield. David Harbour's Red Guardian can contribute more than comedy. Hannah John Kamen's Ghost has abilities uniquely useful for infiltration. Louis Pullman's Bob introduces extraordinary power and vulnerability. Danny Ramirez's Falcon can contribute aerial strategy. The ensemble becomes manageable when abilities and personalities are treated as tools in the narrative. Every character does not require equal dialogue. They require meaningful function. One character may carry an emotional subplot. Another may solve a tactical problem. Another may expose Doom's deception. Another may sacrifice an opportunity. Another may challenge the leader. This is how a giant cast becomes a story rather than a roll call. The most exciting possibility is that by the end of Doomsday, these characters no longer feel like separate franchises. Not because their differences disappear, but because they have shared something impossible. The original Avengers became a team after surviving New York together. Doomsday could create a similar foundational experience for an entire multiversal generation. Fantastic Four remain a family. X-Men remain X-Men. Wakandans remain Wakandans. But when the next catastrophe arrives, they know one another. That changes Marvel's cinematic universe permanently. Secret Wars can then begin with relationships already established rather than spending another movie introducing everyone. Reed knows Sam. Sue knows Shuri. Thor knows the X-Men. Cyclops knows how Avengers fight. Loki knows what Doom is capable of. Namor knows which heroes he trusts and which he does not. Those relationships become narrative infrastructure. Marvel has spent years expanding outward. Doomsday may be the moment it begins connecting inward again. That may ultimately be the film's most important job. It is not simply bringing Robert Downey Jr. back or putting famous heroes in one frame. It is creating a believable network from a universe that has become enormous. Doctor Doom is the pressure that forces that network to form. The collision of worlds is the physical manifestation of Marvel's franchises colliding. The Fantastic Four, Avengers and X-Men literally entering one another's spaces mirrors the larger cinematic convergence happening around them. If the filmmakers recognize that parallel, Doomsday can become surprisingly elegant despite its scale. The story would essentially ask whether different worlds can coexist without losing what makes them distinct. That question applies to characters, civilizations and even Marvel franchises. Doom's answer may be control, one ruler, one order, one solution. The hero's answer must be more difficult. They have to prove that difference does not automatically lead to destruction. They have to cooperate without becoming identical. That is what an Avengers movie should ultimately represent. The Avengers were never powerful because everyone was the same. They were powerful because completely different people chose to stand together when standing alone was easier. Doomsday can expand that idea from 6 heroes to entire worlds. If Marvel accomplishes that, the enormous cast stops being a marketing gimmick and becomes the thematic foundation of the movie. And that is why the officially confirmed concept of worlds colliding may be the most important information Marvel has revealed about Avengers Doomsday so far. It tells us that this is not merely a story about Doctor Doom attacking a collection of superheroes. It is potentially a story about incompatible realities, incompatible philosophies and incompatible forms of leadership being forced into the same crisis. Reed Richards cannot solve that alone. Sam Wilson cannot lead everyone automatically. Thor cannot overpower the problem. Xavier cannot simply persuade everyone. Magneto cannot protect only his own people. Shuri cannot build one device and end the conflict. Loki cannot trick reality into behaving. Namor cannot isolate his civilization forever. Every character's normal solution has limits. Doctor Doom can exploit those limits because he offers the seductive alternative of absolute control. The heroes must discover something Doom cannot understand, a solution created by people who disagree with one another but still refuse to abandon one another. If that becomes the emotional and intellectual core of Avengers Doomsday, the film could deliver something more valuable than the biggest superhero battle Marvel has ever created. It could explain why, after everything the Marvel Cinematic Universe has lost, changed and expanded into, the idea of the Avengers still matters.